Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. This is a very special installment of reading you an excerpt of my favorite book to convince you to read it, except this is actually a part of my new everyday series, at least for this week, called Narnia Week, where I read you the first chapter of each Chronicles of Narnia to convince you to read it, which I'm sure that most people watching, I feel like most everyone kind of ever in the world almost like at least knows about these books or has maybe like read them or whatever, but hey, more people should be reading Narnia anyway and should get the chance to read it. And so if you're someone who happens to be one of, like, I don't know, maybe like the 1% who hasn't read Narnia, hopefully this convinces you to read or to read it. And I'm also going to be giving you guys some fun facts along the way. So first of all, the book that I will be reading the first chapter of today is The Magician's Nephew, obviously by C.S. Lewis. So yeah, I'm calling this Narnia Week, but I also might slip up and call it C.S. Lewis Week, but just know it's just Narnia. So I'm really excited about this. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going in order of the most popular reading order, but something that I wanted to add is kind of like a little tidbit in each of my videos is talking about the reading order. And I think it would be pretty fun to um, talk about that with, I don't really know how to explain this, but like, for example, since this is the first book in the reading order that I'm talking about today, I'm going to talk about the specific reading order that this pertains to. Hopefully that makes sense. So, to help me kind of explain these different reading orders, I have the Narnia, the companion to Narnia. Thank God we still have this. So, for a while, I was thinking that there was only like three different reading orders, but it turns out there's four. So, there's quite a lot. It's very interesting. So, a couple of these orders, I think two of them start with one particular book, but I'm not going to say which one. Those I will be talking about in my next video, which you can probably guess what that one will be. But I'm going to be talking about, oh, yes, this one. It's called The Order by Internal Chronology, the chronological order. And this one was actually suggested by C.S. Lewis himself, who I believe was writing a letter to a fan. Yes. Okay, so this was from a letter that was written on April 23rd, 1957, and but this letter was not published until the 80s, and it was to a fan named Lawrence. Dear Lawrence, I think I agree with your order for reading the books more than with your mother's. The series was not planned beforehand as she thinks. When I wrote The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, I did not know I was going to write any more. Then I wrote Prince Caspian as a sequel and still didn't think there would be any more. And when I had done The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, sorry, I feel like I'm gonna sneeze. Oh gosh. Whew, okay. Okay, I'm good. Sorry, sometimes if I feel like I'm gonna sneeze, but I don't wanna sneeze, I'll just like pinch my nose and it actually kind of stops it. Whew. Did not want to sneeze on camera. Not with my new fancy schmancy little microphone here. I felt quite sure it would be the last, but I found I was wrong. So perhaps it does not matter very much in which order anyone reads them, which I do think he's kind of right about that. I feel like with Narnia, you can kind of read them in any order, but I feel like for new readers, like there are certain orders that maybe you can read them. Um, I'm not even sure that all the others were written in the same order in which they were published. I never keep notes of that sort of thing and never remember dates. That's so funny. And then it goes back to the author of the companion. This letter suggests the change that HarperCollins implemented in 1994 when the decision was made to make the British editions the World English editions. This has come to be called the chronological order, aka The Magician's Nephew, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, The Horse and His Boy, Prince Caspian, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, The Silver Chair, and The Last Battle. So Yes. Um, oh, yeah, and this is also an interesting fact. As I said in the preface, most scholars disagree with this decision and find it the least faithful to Lewis's deepest intentions and to the meanings the books have acquired among the most devoted readers. Yes. So, anyway, I think it's kind of interesting to do it in chronological order because, you know, I feel like in that way you're getting, sorry, my back is itchy. I feel like you're getting like, oh, don't do that nose. Ugh. I feel like you're getting like, you know, the full story. But there are other ways to read it, to look at the story. And I think reading order is kind of a fascinating thing with this kind of series because it's just like you can do it in lots of different orders. So, anyway, without further ado, because I don't want this video to be too long, I'm going to get to reading the first chapter of The Magician's Nephew, which was published in 1955. I believe it was the second to last that was written, but again, we'll get to that later. Um, Let me see if I can think of a couple of fun facts about this one. Oh yeah, this one is not really a fun topic for me, and I feel like I could go on about it for a very long time, but I'm just going to touch on it. Apparently, The Magician's Nephew is currently in production as a movie for Netflix, and it is being directed by Greta Gerwig. You can tell that I'm not a fan of her. I'm just gonna spare saying any other things because I just thinking of what how I was raised essentially is just like if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it. But she's going to ruin it. I know she is. Um, that's all I kind of have to say about that pretty much. There's like so many different things about the story of not just the magician's nephew, but just the story of Narnia as a whole that I know for a fact that this woman does not truly care. She is not going to get the heart, especially like because I truly feel, and a lot of people would probably disagree with me on this. I feel like you need to be a believer in order to properly convey the heart and the messages of these books. Or at the very least, you really do have to have a respect for Lewis's vision. And if you're someone who is more interested in spreading the message of radical feminism and demeaning men and making it look like the women are smarter and the men are just dumb no matter what they try to do to help. Yeah, some things are going to get really messy. I'm really worried about how she's going to portray the evil witch, the White Witch, because the White Witch does have her origins in this book. And especially the whole thing with Aslan. I'm not really sure exactly because there was some controversy on the. Oh wait, he's not even on the cover, but the casting of Aslan. I don't know if that truly is something that is rock solid of whether or not he is going to be voiced by a woman or not. I don't know if that's actually solid or if that was just like a really big rumor or something that was being considered, but we'll see in the coming weeks. But essentially, this is a movie that I'm not going to watch or get behind. I just, not gonna lie, I'm honestly just hoping that it gets canceled because there is nothing that Greta Gerwig can do that I think is going to make this amazing. I have no hope for her. I'm sorry. Well, no hope in her acting, sorry, directing abilities. So yeah, and I have so many thoughts on and definitely strong opinions on how she did Little Women. You can fight me in that, but I said what I said. And instead of me doing a whole video about that, I'm just going to let somebody else do it. There's actually a really good video. I'm going to link it down in the description below. There's a video by this woman. I haven't seen it in a while, so I need to find it and just put it in the description. But there was this woman who talked about the real issue with Gerwig's Little Women and how she portrayed the character of Joe, and she did a really good job like debating, like, kind of like giving this really solid argument as to why Greta's version of Little Women was terrible and how she got the characters wrong, and she does a way better job at arguing that point than I do, so I'm going to let her do it. So if you want to watch that, very intriguing video, down in the description below. So, go watch that after you watch this video. Is very helpful. And if I might just give a plug for a better, more faithful adaptation of Little Women, I highly suggest the PBS Masterpiece Theater edition that came out, I think either the year before or the year after, or maybe even the same year as Gerwig's edition. And it stars Maya Hawke as Joe March. Maya Hawke from, like, Stranger Things fame. Um, she does such a good job playing Joe. I won't spoil anything, but just that version definitely needs more love and recognition than the Greta Gerwig version because PBS got it right. So anyway, I'm gonna step off my soapbox and I'm gonna read you guys the first chapter of The Magician's Nephew. So, fun backstory on this. My mom read these books so many times to me and my brother. We even did like a fun Chronicles of Narnia study because me and my brother were homeschooled growing up. And if you were one of those really cool homeschoolers like me and my brother, we listened to the Focus on the Family radio theater audio dramas of Chronicles of Narnia. Shout out, shout out. And yeah, let's just say I listened to those so many times. I have kind of like the cadence and the accents pretty down pat of how the actors did it because it's just, I listened to them so many times. In fact, fun fact about me, a lot of people would ask my parents like where I was from because they thought that I was adopted. They thought I was like an actual British child because I desperately wanted to be British. So, also, if there's any British people watching, I'm sorry if I do get any of the accents wrong, but also I'm gonna have some fun with it because I do love, kind of stretching my acting muscle. So, anyway, without further ado, we're 10 minutes, nope, 12 minutes into this video. So, I'm gonna finally start. I hope that you guys don't mind this long introduction, but here we go. Chapter 1 of Magician's Nephew, The Wrong Door. Also, I will not just be doing the British accents for the characters. I will be doing it as the narrator as well because I love C.S. Lewis's like the voice of his narrator, especially if you listened to the audio drama. Chapter 1. This is a story about something that happened long ago when your grandfather was a child. It is a very important story because it shows how all the comings and goings between our world and the land of Narnia first began. In those days, Mr. Sherlock Holmes was still living in Baker Street, and the Bastables were looking for treasure in the Lewisham Road. In those days, if you were a boy, you had to wear a stiff Eton collar every day, and schools were usually nastier than they are now. But meals were nicer, and as for sweets, I won't tell you how cheap and good they were because it would only make your mouth water in vain. And in those days there lived in London a girl called Polly Plummer. She lived in one of a long row of houses which were all joined together. One morning she was out in the back garden when a boy scrambled up from the garden next door and put his face over the wall. Polly was very surprised because up till now there had never been any children in that house, but only Mr. Ketterley and Miss Ketterley, a brother and sister, an old bachelor and an old maid, living together. So she looked up, full of curiosity. The face of the strange boy was very grubby. It could hardly have been grubbier if he had first rubbed his hands in the earth, and then had a good cry, and then dried his face with his hands. As a matter of fact, this is very nearly what he had been doing. "Hullo," said Polly. "Hullo," said the boy. "What's your name?" "Polly," said Polly. "What's yours?" "Diggory," said the boy. "I say, what a funny name," said Polly. "It isn't half so funny as Polly," said Diggory. "Yes, it is," said Polly. "No, it isn't," said Diggory. "At any rate, I do wash my face," said Polly, "which is what you need to do, especially after—" and then she stopped. She had been going to say after you've been blubbing, but she thought that wouldn't be polite. All right, I have then, said Diggory, in a much louder voice, like a boy who was so miserable that he didn't care who knew he had been crying. And so would you, he went on, if you'd lived all your life in the country and had a pony and a river at the bottom of the garden, and had been brought to live in a beastly hole like this. London isn't a hole, said Polly indignantly, but the boy was too wound up to take any notice of her, and he went on, and if your father was away in India, and you had to come and live with an aunt and an uncle who's mad, who would like that? And if the reason that was that they were looking after your mother, and if your mother was ill and was going to die, then his face went to the wrong sort of shape, as it does when you're trying to keep back your tears. I didn't know. I'm sorry, said Polly humbly. And then, because she hardly knew what to say, and also to turn Diggory's mind to cheerful subjects, she asked, Is Mr. Ketterley really mad? Well, either he's mad, said Diggory, or there's some other mystery. He has a study on the top floor, and Aunt Letty says I must never go up there. Well, that looks fishy to begin with. And then there's another thing. Whenever he tries to say anything to me at meal times, he never even tries to talk to her. She always shuts him up. She always says, Don't worry the boy, Andrew, or I'm sure Diggory doesn't want to hear about that, or else, Now, Diggory, wouldn't you like to go out and play in the garden? What sort of things does he try to say? I don't know. He never gets far enough. But there's more than that. One night, it was last night in fact, as I was going past the foot of the attic stairs on my way to bed, and I don't much care for going past them either, I was sure I heard a yell. Perhaps he keeps a mad wife shut up in there. Yes, I've thought of that. Or perhaps he's a coiner, or he might have been a pirate, like the man at the beginning of Treasure Island, and be always hiding from his old shipmates. How exciting, said Polly. I never knew your house was so interesting. You may think it interesting, said Diggory, but you wouldn't like it if you had to sleep there. How would you like to lie awake listening for Uncle Andrew's step to come creeping along the passage to your room? And he has such awful eyes. That was how Polly and Diggory got to know one another, and as it was just the beginning of the summer holidays, and neither of them was going to the sea that year, they met nearly every day. Their adventures began chiefly because it was one of the wettest and coldest summers there had been for years, that drove them to do indoor things. You might say indoor exploration. It is wonderful how much exploring you can do with a stump of candle in a big house or in a row of houses. Polly had discovered long ago that if you opened a certain little door in the box room attic of her house, you would find the cistern and a dark place behind it in which you could get into into by a little careful climbing, or you could get into by a little careful climbing. The dark place was like a long tunnel with brick wall on one side and sloping roof on the other. In the roof there were little chunks of light between the slats. There was no floor in this tunnel. You had to step from rafter to rafter, and between them there was only plaster. If you stepped on this, you would find yourself falling through the ceiling of the room below. Polly had used the bit of the tunnel just beside the cistern as a smuggler's cave. She had brought up bits of old packing cases and the seats of broken kitchen chairs and things of that sort, and spread them across from rafter to rafter so as to make a bit of floor. Here she kept a cash box containing various treasures, and a story she was writing, and usually a few apples. She had often drunk a quiet bottle of ginger beer in there. The old bottles made it look more like a smuggler's cave. Oh, also, these editions have cute little illustrations. Hopefully you can see that. I don't know. These are nice little like colored illustrations. Sorry, I thought you might enjoy that. Diggory quite liked the cave. She wouldn't let him see the story, but he was more interested in exploring. Look here, he said. How long does this tunnel go on for? I mean, does it stop where your house ends? No, said Polly. The walls don't go out to the roof. It goes on. I don't know how far. Then we could get the length of the whole row of houses. So we could, said Polly. And oh, I say, what? We could get into the other houses. Yes, and get taken up for burglars. No thanks. Don't be so jolly clever. I was thinking of the house beyond yours. What about it? Why, it's the empty one. Daddy says it's always been empty ever since we came here. I suppose we ought to have a look at it then, said Diggory. He was a good deal more excited than you'd have thought from the way he spoke, for of course he was thinking, just as you might have been, of all the reasons why the house might have been empty for so long. So was Polly. Neither of them said the word haunted, and both felt or that once the thing had been suggested, it would not or be feeble to, or it would be feeble not to do it all, or not to do it. Shall we go and try it now? Said Diggory. All right, said Polly. Don't if you'd rather not, said Diggory. I'm game if you are, said she. How are we to know when we're in the next house but one? They decided they would have to go out into the box room and walk across it, taking steps as long as the steps from one rafter to the next. That that would give them an idea of how many rafters went to a room. Then they would allow about four more for the passage between the two attics in Polly's house, and then the same number for the maid's bedroom as for the box room. That would give them the length of the house. When they had done that distance twice, they would be at the end of Diggory's house. Any door they came to after that would let them into an attic of the empty house. But I don't expect it's really empty at all, said Diggory. What do you expect? I expect someone lives there in secret, only coming in and out at night with a dark lantern. We shall probably discover a gang of desperate criminals and get a reward. It's all rot to say a house would be empty all these years, unless there was some mystery. Daddy thought it must be the drains, said Polly. Pooh! Grown-ups are always thinking of uninteresting explanations, said Diggory. Now that they were talking by daylight in the attic instead of by candlelight in the smuggler's cave, it seemed much less likely that the empty house would be haunted. When they had measured the attic, they had to get a pencil and do a sum. They both got different answers at first, and even when they agreed, I'm not sure they got it right. They were in a hurry to start on the exploration. We mustn't make a sound, said Polly, as they climbed in again behind the cistern. Because it was such an important occasion, they took a candle each. Polly had a good store of these in her cave. It was very dark and dusty and draughty, and they stepped from rafter to rafter without a word except when they whispered to one another, We're almost to your attic now, or this must be halfway through our house. And neither of them stumbled, and the candles didn't go out. And at last they came to where they could see a little door in the brick wall on their right. There was no bolt or handle on this side of it, of course, for the door had been made for getting in, not for getting out. But there was a catch, as there often is or, or is on the inside of a cupboard door, which they felt sure they would be able to turn. Shall I? Said Diggory. I'm game if you are, said Polly, just as she had said before. Both felt that this was, or both felt that it was becoming very serious, but neither would draw back. Diggory pushed round the catch with some difficulty. The door swung open, and the sudden daylight made them blink. Then, with a great shock, they saw that they were looking, not into a deserted attic, but into a furnished room. But it seemed empty enough. It was dead silent. Polly's curiosity got the better of her. She blew out her candle and stepped out into the strange room, making no more noise than a mouse. It was shaped, of course, like an attic, but furnished like a sitting room. Every bit of the walls was lined with shelves, and every bit of the shelves was full of books. A fire was burning in the grate. You remember that it was a very cold, wet summer that year, and in the front of the fireplace, with its back toward them, was a high-backed armchair. Between the chair and Polly, and filling most of the middle of the room, was a big table piled with all sorts of things, printed books, and books of the sort you write in, and ink bottles and pens and sealing wax and a microscope. But what she noticed first was a bright red wooden tray with a number of rings on it. They were in pairs, a yellow one and a green one together, and then a little space, and then another yellow one and another green one. But they were no bigger than ordinary rings, and no one could help noticing them because they were so bright. They were the most beautiful, shiny little things you can imagine. If Polly had been a very little younger, she would have wanted to put one in her mouth. The room was so quiet that you noticed the ticking of the clock at once. And yet, as she now found, it was not absolutely quiet either. There was a very, very faint humming sound. If vacuum cleaners had been invented in those days, Polly would have thought it was the sound of a hoover being worked a long way off, several rooms away and several floors below. But it was a nicer sound than that, a more musical tone, only so faint you could hardly hear it. "It's all right. There's no one here," said Polly over her shoulder to Diggory. She was speaking above a whisper now, and Diggory came out, blinking, and looking extremely dirty, as indeed Polly was too. "This is no good," he said. "It's not an empty house at all. We better leave before anyone comes." "What do you think those are?" said Diggory, pointing at the colored rings. "Oh, come on," said Diggory. "The sooner we—" He never finished what he was going to say, for at that moment something happened. The high-backed chair in front of the fire moved suddenly, and there rose up from it, like a pantomime demon coming out of a trap door, the alarming form of Uncle Andrew. They were not in the empty house at all. They were in Diggory's house, and in the forbidden study. Both children said, "Oh!" and realized their terrible mistake. They felt they ought to have known all along that they hadn't gone nearly far enough. Uncle Andrew was tall and very thin. He had a long, clean-shaven face, with a sharply pointed nose and extremely bright eyes, and a great tousled mop of gray hair. Diggory was quite speechless, for Uncle Andrew looked 1,000 times more alarming than he had ever looked before. Polly was not so frightened yet, but she soon was, for the very first thing Uncle Andrew did was to walk across to the door out of the room, shut it, and turn the key in the lock. Then he turned round, fixed the children with his bright eyes, and smiled, showing all his teeth. "There," he said, "now my fool of a sister can't get at you." It was dreadfully unlike anything a grown-up would be expected to do. Polly's heart came into her mouth, and she and Diggory started back toward the little door they had come in by. Uncle Andrew was too quick for them. He got behind them and shut that door too, and stood in front of it. Then he rubbed his hands and made his knuckles crack. He had very long, beautifully white fingers. "I am delighted to see you," he said. "Two children are just what I wanted." "Please, Mr. Ketterly," said Polly, "it's nearly my dinner time and I've got to go home. Will you let us out, please?" "Not just yet," said Uncle Andrew. "This is too good an opportunity to miss. I wanted two children. You see, I'm in the middle of a great experiment. I've tried it on a guinea pig, and it seemed to work. But then a guinea pig can't tell you anything. You can't explain to it how to come back. Look here, Uncle Andrew," said Diggory. "It really is dinner time, and they'll be looking for us in a moment. You must let us out." "Must?" said Uncle Andrew. Diggory and Polly glanced at each other. They dared not say anything, but the glances meant, "Isn't this dreadful?" and "We must humor him." "If you let us go for our dinner now," said Polly, "we could come back after dinner." "Ah, but how would I know that you would?" said Uncle Andrew with a cunning smile. Then he seemed to change his mind. "Well, well," he said, "if you really must go, I suppose you must. I can't expect two youngsters like you to find it much fun talking to an old buffer like me." He sighed and went on. "You've no idea how lonely I sometimes am. But no matter. Go on to your dinner. But I must give you a present before you go. It's not every day that I see a little girl in my dingy old study, especially, if I may say so, such a very attractive young lady as yourself. Polly began to think he might not really be mad after all. Wouldn't you like a ring, my dear? Said Uncle Andrew to Polly. Do you mean one of those yellow or green ones? Said Polly. How lovely! Not a green one, said Uncle Andrew. I'm afraid I can't give the green ones away, but I'd be delighted to give you any of the yellow ones with my love. Come and try one on. Polly had now quite gotten over her fright, and felt sure that the old gentleman was not mad, and there was certainly something strangely attractive about those bright rings. She moved over to the tray. Why, I declare, she said, that humming noise gets louder here. It's almost as if the rings were making it. What a funny fancy, my dear, said Uncle Andrew with a laugh. It sounded a very natural laugh, but Diggory had seen an eager, almost a greedy look on his face. Polly, don't be a fool, he shouted. Don't touch them. It was too late. Exactly as he spoke, Polly's hand went out to touch one of the rings, and immediately, without a flash or a noise or a warning of any sort, there was no Polly. Diggory and his uncle were alone in the room. I hope that my dramatic reading has intrigued you enough to want to read the rest of this book. Oh my gosh, I just love getting into it and like reading as the characters and just like as I read like their lines, I'm just like remembering like the actors and like the audio drama, and it's so much fun. So I really hope that you guys enjoyed this, and I hope that you will stay tuned tomorrow for the next book that I will be reading, which is going to be The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So stay tuned for that, and happy Narnia week. Love you guys. Bye.